There's a simple tool that costs less than $100 that will help you ensure you do not get any of that dreadful ghosting and jitter in your footage. If you own a GoPro or any action camera, then you probably know what I'm talking about. If you don't know what I'm talking about, let me share a quick and somewhat sad story that illustrates this. So let's go back to 2019. In 2019, my wife and I were embarking on a hike up the mighty Mount Washington in New Hampshire. If you've not heard of Mount Washington is known as the most dangerous small mountain in the world. No matter which trail you hike to the top, it's very challenging and the weather can change very quickly on Mount Washington. But Mount Washington also has a lot of stunning scenery along the hike and at the top. So naturally, I brought along my GoPro to capture this adventure. We had a blast on this hike and I absolutely loved the challenge of this hike. Lots and lots of steep, really rocky trails. Some trails were so steep that I felt like I was crawling up them. I got home and excitedly copied all the clips off my GoPro to my computer. I was ready to edit these clips, but when I started watching the clips, I quickly discovered something wasn't right. Many of my clips were full of this terrible jitter and ghosting, and because of this, those clips were completely unusable. And even though I enjoyed the adventure and I'll have those memories forever, it was sad to not have many usable clips from this hike that I could put together to visually remember and share the adventure. And I tell you this story so that you can see and understand what I mean when I say jitter and ghosting. Most importantly, I tell you this story because I want to help ensure this does not happen to you. So here's the concise version of why and when jitter and ghosting will occur on your GoPro or other action camera. Jitter and ghosting will occur when two conditions are met at the same time. Condition number one is hypersmooth is turned on, and you're not using anything else to stabilize your GoPro, you're just depending on the built-in hypersmooth to do so. Condition number two is your shutter speed is slower than 1/200. If both of these conditions are met, there will be at least some ghosting and jitter in your footage. And the slower your shutter speed is, the worse the jitter and ghosting will be. So if you're in low light or you're hiking in a forest like I was under a lot of dark pine trees or heavy foliage, the jitter and ghosting is going to be bad. And there are ways to prevent this. For instance, you could just set your shutter speed to anything faster than 1/200 manually, and that will ensure you don't get the jitter and ghosting. However, if you're filming in low light, where a slower shutter speed is really beneficial because it lets more light into that small sensor on your action camera, setting a shutter speed faster than 1/200 is not ideal or helpful. Additionally, if you're using ND filters on your GoPro and you want to get that 180-degree shutter angle with 24 or 30 frames per second, then setting the shutter speed faster than 1/200 is not going to be an option. Because at 24 or 30 frames per second, you're going to want your shutter speed to be 1/48 or 1/60 to get the 180-degree shutter angle. And at those shutter speeds, you are going to see that ghosting and jitter if you're depending on hypersmooth only to stabilize your GoPro. So the tool that you're going to want is you're going to want a gimbal. But when I say this, you're probably going to think, well, a gimbal is going to cost a lot, it's going to be difficult to use, and it's going to be large and heavy to bring along. When one of the advantages of a GoPro is it's tiny and easy to bring along anywhere you go. All of these are valid concerns, but the gimbal I'm going to talk about today alleviates these concerns. This gimbal is low cost, it costs less than $100, it's easy to use, and it's quite portable. And the best part is you don't have to be a professional with gimbals to get great results with this gimbal. But before I show you how easy this gimbal is to use, I want to show you what this gimbal is capable of. So I've got 5 clips here that I'm going to show you. I'm going to sequentially go through these and explain to you what each clip is so you can see for yourself the difference this makes. So first of all, this is me filming with the GoPro Hero 12 handheld. The shutter speed is set to auto, and I have hypersmooth turned on, and I have nothing else, just the GoPro in my hands. Even though it's overcast on this day, the sun is still pretty bright and it's the middle of the day. So I have that auto shutter speed, but the shutter defaults to about 1/1000 for the shutter speed. So there won't be any jitter or ghosting in this footage, but the footage looks really sharp and it looks very choppy with that running. All of the frames are too sharp for my liking and I don't like how it looks. I find that GoPro or any footage with a slower shutter speed looks a lot more natural with that motion blur, especially when you're moving quickly. So what I do next is I pop on an ND16 ND filter, and then I set the shutter speed to 1/48, and I leave hypersmooth on. So as I run now, you quickly see jitter and ghosting appears in the frame. Even though it's a bright day out, I have that shutter speed of 1/48 combined with hypersmooth, and the jitter and ghosting looks terrible. So for clip number 3, I turned hypersmooth off because, well, it can't be that bad with stabilization off, right? Well, the jitter and ghosting is now gone, but now my footage is terrible and shaky without the stabilization, and it's unusable for a different reason. So in clip number 4, I mount the GoPro onto this gimbal, but I leave hypersmooth off, and I leave the ND filter on, and I leave the shutter speed at 1/48. Okay, that's better, but it's still got a little bit too much shake for my liking with the gimbal. And sure, if I was walking with this gimbal doing heel to toe, the footage would be a lot smoother, but I'm running with this gimbal, and running, even with a good gimbal, is going to introduce quite a bit of bounce into the footage. So finally, for the 5th clip, I turn on hypersmooth, I leave the ND16 filter on, I have the shutter speed set to 1/48, and then I run again. Wow. Now that I love. Not only is the footage nice and smooth, but there's no jitter and ghosting either. So let's take a look again at all these 5 clips on one screen next to each other for comparisons. Seeing all of these on one screen together really shows which clip stands out as the best combination. So your next question may be, why didn't you get jitter and ghosting? Because you did have hypersmooth on in clip number 5, and you did have a shutter speed at 1/48. The reason I didn't get it is because I had the GoPro mounted on the gimbal. The gimbal provided enough manual stabilization with the motors that you didn't get a lot of that micro bouncing and movement of the GoPro. So what the gimbal did is it took some of the stress off hypersmooth, and hypersmooth did not have to work as hard to match up the frames later on. But hypersmooth also provided enough of a boost that the stabilization looked much smoother and better than when I ran with the GoPro on the gimbal and hypersmooth off. So the great thing about this gimbal is with this gimbal, you can prevent jitter and ghosting, and you can do so without this needing to be expensive, complex, or bulky. Let me show you how easy it is to mount a GoPro on this gimbal. You're going to have the buttons on the gimbal facing toward you, and you're going to make sure this part of the gimbal right here, where it says iSteady Pro 4, you're just going to make sure that that's upright so you can read it. And then you're going to turn this around. Here's where you're going to put your GoPro. So you're going to take the back of your GoPro, and you're going to put that back against here. And then you're going to take this part right here with the orange tab, you're going to pull out on it, and you're going to wrap it over the top of your GoPro. And then you're going to push this orange piece down into the slot right here, and that's going to hold the GoPro in place. So once it's attached, you're going to turn it back around, and we can power it on. And there's no balancing or anything you have to do at that point. You power it on, and it's already there and mounted. So this gimbal does have 4 different modes that you can use. The modes are right here. These are the PF mode, the PTF mode, the L mode, and the POV. The modes I most often use are the L mode. The L mode stands for lock, and this generally keeps the camera in place the best. So you can see right here, camera doesn't really move. It stays in place nicely. However, I also use the PF mode often, and the PF mode is the one it's going to default to when you first turn it on. PF stands for pan follow. This allows it to pan nicely sideways, but it keeps it oriented properly up and down. I will also mention most newer GoPros can pair via Bluetooth to this gimbal. I do find the pairing process can sometimes be a bit glitchy. So if I already have my GoPro paired to my phone, or paired to a remote, or other external device via Bluetooth, what I sometimes have to do is I have to clear all of those on my GoPro first, and then I need to pair it only to the gimbal here. It'll usually work at that point. However, some of the time I just use my phone to stop and start the GoPro via the Quick app. Or if you own the GoPro remote, the Bluetooth one, you can just use that as well. Or you can carefully hit the button on here to start and stop the recording if you want to. The Bluetooth pairing with this gimbal is honestly not a really big deal to me. All I care about is that this gimbal prevents jitter and ghosting, it gets me high quality results in low lighting or with a 180-degree shutter angle, and it costs less than $100. Those are the things I really care about. And personally, I just love how easy it is to mount the GoPro on here. I don't have to do anything special, pop it into place, and it's good to go. Oh yeah, and I should probably tell you what gimbal this is that I'm using. This gimbal is the Hohem iSteady Pro 4. I've used this gimbal for a few years now, and I absolutely love it. It's really an essential tool for getting that cinematic looking footage with that really appealing motion blur. I've linked to this gimbal in the description below, so you can check it out. And if you'd like to learn more about some of the creative shots I use this gimbal for, check out this video right here.